Welcome everybody to our April 2021 Zoom tasting. We're excited to see you all again. It's super nice to see you guys at the Sunday in the park, at least to pick up your kits and at least to see your smiling eyes, even though we may not be able to see your your smile. Really quickly, before we pass it over to Adam Harris, whom we're extremely excited to have tonight, I just want to make a brief introduction to Mike Johnson. Mike Johnson is, I don't know your exact title, you can share what that is, but Mike is our new contact here in St. Louis for Beam Suntory. So this is his first Missouri Whiskey Society meeting, so let's all give him a wave and welcome him to
Thank
St.
you.
Louis. And
Hello.
Mike, do you want to say anything? You don't have to.
Well, yeah. So I'm Mike Johnson. I'm sorry I'm bouncing on and off mute because I got two little kids crying in the background. No, so I'm the new territory manager of Eastern Missouri. So I'm really happy to start doing events with you guys. It's I'm just super excited. I've actually gotten to meet Elizabeth in person, which is not something you feel like you should have to tell people these days. But yeah, I appreciate you guys having me here, and I appreciate Adam showing up for us, and ready to expand my own knowledge on a lot of these. So.
Excellent. Well, thanks, Mike, for everything in your partnership. We couldn't do what we do without you. So thank you so much. And Adam, really appreciate it. So we just have a few things of business to talk about before we get into the tasting. First of all, Women in Whiskey, we have an awesome event lined up for next Wednesday. And it'll be at Mix and Match downtown St. Louis. As a shopping event. And we're actually doing a tequila tasting. Mike, I'm gonna mess it up. El
Tesoro.
El Tesoro. Okay, thank you. I never took Spanish. I took art class. And so we are actually doing tequila, which is like, okay, well, why tequila? Well, whiskey barrels are used in the aging process of tequila. So we're going to learn about the importance of whiskey in the tequila industry. And obviously, if you're gonna like whiskey, you're gonna love tequila. So we're very excited about that. Learn more at womenwhiskey.com or just send me a message. I'll give you those details. Just a little teaser. Baseball Battles Cancer is a charity of mine. And I've actually lined up with the help of Mike and Dustin Paris, a Bourbon Trail raffle. So it's a Bourbon Trail trip raffle ticket opportunity. So it's 2 nights stay at the Omni, a tour for 2 at Maker's Mark and Lux Row. And you'll see on the Facebook page raffle tickets for that coming out soon. And the last thing is Select. So if you are not a Select member and you sign up during our meeting, so within the half hour, you'll be added to tonight's raffle. And tonight's raffle is a bottle of Legent, which we are tasting tonight, and also a bottle of Basil Hayden Dark Rye. And then Derek is going to talk about some plans and some things that he's working on that are going to hopefully benefit Missouri Whiskey Society.
Great. Thanks, Elizabeth. First of all, I appreciate everybody joining. It was really nice to see just about everyone that's on this on Sunday. Thank you. It was nice to get out and have a few whiskeys with everyone. And that's kind of the spirit of what we like to do. So it's nice to be online, but it's also nice to be in person a little bit. So I can't wait to get more of that going. We have some very exciting things coming up. I got word today that we do have 4 barrels in the warehouse. Being in the warehouse at Southern Glazers is sometimes a little bit tricky. So we're not sure when it's going to be available for us. But we are going to open that up for the select members to do a private tasting. And we would like to do that in person as well. So look forward to that coming soon. Hopefully in the next few weeks, we'll be able to announce at least when that's going to be. But we're very excited to have those barrels in finally and to start doing some more things in person, which is really great. And we'll also have some of those available for you to buy as well, if you're interested. So we appreciate the select members. We appreciate all the membership. Thank you for joining us. I know, Adam Harris, he's been such a supporter over the years, and we really appreciate it. I don't know if he's on right now, but we really appreciate what he does. Yeah, there he is. and what you've always done for Gamblin' Whiskey House and for the Whiskey Society. Just anytime you show up, it's always it's a great treat. We're really excited to have you on again. So thank you very much for joining us. Does anyone else have any questions about maybe this online tasting or anything else, any other things like that? No?
All right. And if you guys don't mind, just mute yourselves. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to unmute and ask. We want this to be a conversation, not just a presentation. And if you don't feel comfortable unmuting yourself, or if you have crazy background noise, if you want to send your question in a chat, we'll make sure that Adam can get to it. All right, Adam.
All right. Well, hello, everybody. Nice to see some familiar faces. Nice to see some new faces. Hey, it's nice to see faces these days, right? So I want to say thank you to Derek and Elizabeth for having me back. I know this is maybe, I think, either my third or fourth visit virtually during this past 12, 14 months since you guys have been up and running with the Virtual Whiskey Society. But our relationship goes so much further back than that. I've had the wonderful pleasure of, first of all, I guess I should say my name is Adam Harris. I'm the Senior Ambassador for the James B. Beam Distilling Company, little distillery located in Claremont, Kentucky, home of the #1 bourbon in the world, Jim Beam, and home to so many loved and coveted bourbons and ryes that are out there that we've been doing for over 225 years now, and as a business. And I've been able to represent those brands for the better part of like the last 15 years. So I've always been in this bourbon advocacy role, always talking about what we do at our distillery to make our bourbon so unique. And probably, I would say maybe 8 years ago, that started bringing me around to Missouri quite a bit, where I first got to meet Derek and Elizabeth. And it's hard to imagine that we've known each other for that long at this point. But, when you're having a good time, time does fly, right? And whenever we've been together, we've always had the opportunity to have a couple of good times, if nothing but good times. But it is always great to be visiting you guys. It's always great to be talking with y'all because there's such great engagement with this particular club. The barrel picks that I've been able to be a part of through history with y'all, the enthusiasm that you've always had for tasting some of those barrels, and just the support and love that you guys have for whiskey in general, but also your neighbors over to the southeast and Kentucky has always been very appreciated, and it's always been a warm welcome in Missouri. And I still feel that warm welcome even over fiber optic cable, right? So anyway, nice to be back. But we've talked a whole host of things over the years. We've talked about small batch bourbon. We've talked about Jim Beam. We've talked about single barrels, of course. But tonight we are going to talk about a very unique bourbon, which just recently, I think in late 2020, got to Missouri, and that is going to be our Legent Bourbon. And Legent is a very unique bourbon in the way that it's a story that only really Beam Suntory can tell, if you ask me. And what do I mean by that? When you think about the name Beam Suntory, you think about beams, and we can all talk about the 7, now 8 generations of the Beam family bloodline that is in charge of making our whiskey as we have since Jacob Beam started in 1795. And now Fred's son, Booker's grandson, is now our 8th generation distiller. Still not a master distiller by any means, but coming up as a distiller in the ranks there in Claremont at the distillery and doing some amazing stuff. But Fred, being our 7th generation and Booker's son, is our current master distiller and really our figurehead. And I know several of you here have had the opportunity to meet Fred. He's no stranger to Missouri. He's no stranger to St. Louis. And he loves visiting you guys, especially because we have that wonderful cooperage not too far from you guys over there in Columbia at Independence Day that do such a great job of making barrels for us day in and day out. But when you think about the first name on the door and the Beam family, like I just mentioned, our roots run very deep generationally. But not only that, but the Beam family, considering we've been in business for so long, making whiskey in America or bourbon or rye in America for so many years and generations and decades, our influence also helps our roots to grow very wide. And so we truly are the first family of bourbon, not because of our own starting date, but also because of the influence that we've had in the industry. I think that there are quite a few of our contemporaries that would tout a Beam working as their master distiller or working at their distillery for some time, generationally even, if you look over at Heaven Hill and what the Beams have done over there for many generations. And then when you think about some of the upstarts, we've had some Beams working at some of the younger, what people consider craft or upstart distilleries, small distilleries across the country, not just in Kentucky. But we really are the first family of bourbon. And we come by that very legitimately, as I just mentioned. And then when you look at the other name on the door and you look at the name Suntory, that comes from the Torii family over in Japan. And the Torii family are very rich in their own history, but in 1923, they began making the first bits of what would become the Japanese whiskey business. And so even though we've seen that business grow immensely and interest for Japanese whiskey grow immensely over the last handful of years, you know, it really was the Torii family via Suntory as a business that introduced the world to Japanese whiskey. And so they are quite legitimately and accurately the first family of Japanese whiskey. And so when you have these two families come together, these two cultures come together, these two businesses come together, these two whiskey making and drinking cultures come together, it's quite a big deal. And it's hard to believe, Mike, I know you just kind of got on board, but it's really hard to believe that Beam Suntory has been around for over 6 years now. It's an amazing thing, right? I still feel like we're a brand new company in a lot of ways. And like I said, I've been here for 15 years. And when we first came to be, I would believe, and as I tell the story of Legent, I would argue that Legent was thought of not shortly after Beam Suntory was born. And we were acquired by Suntory, so we became Beam Suntory. We were publicly traded for a while. We made a lot of innovative products during that 18-month period that we were publicly traded, just to kind of build up our collateral and make us look bigger and better, and as big and good as we could be. And luckily, we had quite the suitor with Suntory. But all that is to say that we are doing things in a very nice way now with Suntory's leadership. We are really doubling down on what we do well, which is make great bourbon, make great whiskey, and make great products around the world for many of our other distilleries. But as Beam Suntory was born, I believe that this idea to create something that would announce Beam Suntory as a company, as a global whiskey company, as a global spirits company was born. And the two figureheads that brought this project to life are Fred No, who I mentioned, the seventh generation master distiller from the James D. Beam Distilling Company, the great-great-great-great-grandson of Jacob Beam, the great-grandson of Jim Beam, and the son of Booker No. And then we have Shinjiro Tori, who is the fifth ever chief blender from the House of Suntory. And he's been responsible for, you know, Yamazaki, Hakashu, Toki, all of those whiskeys that you may or may not be able to find anywhere in the United States these days, because they're just that delicious. But this gentleman has been in charge of blending those whiskeys for several decades now, and he's really at the top of their game. So we have these wonderful two masters that we can highlight from our cultures, from our distilleries, from our processes, and bring them together to partner up to create a whiskey that is uniquely Suntory and uniquely Beam Suntory. And so when I mentioned that this is a story, the story of Legent is a story that only we can tell, because we're the only two that have authors like Fred and Shinji. And so what I'd like to do really quick is let you guys hear a little bit of the story straight from the horse's mouth before I kind of start to tell my own narrative again. But I'd like to show a little video. It's not too long, but you get to know Fred a little bit more, and you'll get to know Shinji a little bit more, and they'll tell you some of the things that they've enjoyed about the process of making Legent together. So if you'll pardon me for one moment, I will get this together. And I had this pulled up, but when I did the check, apparently I closed it out. So can you guys see that and hear it?
No, not yet.
No, not yet. Okay. Is that out?
All right, you're getting closer. There we go. Okay.
Sharing sound. And see, I thought I was going to be really slick and make this very seamless transition, but you know, hey, we've all been doing this for a year, and yet somebody's always screwing it up, and that's me tonight. So here you go. Enjoy.
My name is Fred No. I'm the master distiller at Jim Beam.
I'm Shinji Fukuyo. I'm the chief blender of Suntory Spirit Limited. I knew the name of Fred many years ago, but I met him probably 4 years ago.
He's very meticulous. He's very on top of his game all the time. I'm sure when when we get together, he probably thinks that I'm kind of silly sometimes because I laugh and cut up a lot.
Fred is very character, but he's kind of a big man. Very good guy to drink with.
But in the end, I mean, the passion is there with both of us. We kind of know what we want, and we both bounce off each other. Well, Legent is a product where we brought East and West together. You know, we took Shinji, the chief blender from Suntory, myself being the master distiller here at Beam, we bring us together to create a product that brings East to West. And so I pretty much produced the bourbon, and then we're using Shinji's finishing techniques to create a new bourbon that people have never experienced before. Legent is a Kentucky bourbon that what we've done is we've taken the skills that Shinji has in finishing in different barrels and aged it to get a finish, and then blending those barrels together to get the common flavor that we want to create this unique bourbon in the end.
When I enjoy the bourbon whiskey, I would like to have a bit more fruitiness and roundness. So, Legent, I would like to add such kind of a milder and fruity. The idea was that the three different components that came very first stage, but since then we needed to recognize how developed during the wine and the sherry cask finishing, and also we have to find out the best balance recipe. So my role for development of Legent itself was I'm in charge of making a blending recipe, and also developed the wine cask and the sherry cask finish whiskey as a component. So from my experience of using wine cask finish, it gives a much milder and just fruity aromas in the whiskey. Sherry finishing whiskey gives much more depth and also very tannic and dried fruits character, which can work for the blending. To decide the final recipe, I have to satisfy the balance and aroma and flavor. I would like to pursue that, better. So when I have to decide the recipe, and also I have nothing else to do anymore, then such kind of attitude would be necessary to make a good whiskey.
I think pursuing new things keeps you fresh and it lets you expand your horizons. People are looking for new things. To me, the idea of mastery in bourbon is to, think outside of the box. Give something that maybe nobody's ever done before, but do the best you can do with what you have to work with to do a little better. Pursuing the best we could do. And I think Legent, is the best we can do together at this point with bourbon and the blending and the finishing. All those techniques brought together are going to create this product that nobody's ever seen before.
End of the day, to decide the final recipe, we tried less than 100 times. I believe Legent has a new character, but still bourbon, but it's much more milder and fruity and long finish, and some character like dried fruits or some vanilla. So it's bourbon, but I believe it's new style bourbon.
That's why it's been a long journey to get to this end. It wasn't the first thing that we came up with. It's been a long, tedious process to get to where we are, and it's going to be well worth the wait.
Awesome. Well, I don't think that there's, I guess I'm done now. Have a nice night, everybody. But really, there's no replacement for, or no substitute for hearing about the product from those two gentlemen right there. And hopefully, just the way that they carry themselves, the way that they talk about whiskey, the way that they kind of communicate their passion for what it is, you understand that there's a certain amount of gravitas when you talk about Fred No and Shinji Fukuya-san coming together to create not just a unique whiskey, but specifically a very unique bourbon, right? And that is definitely what Legent is. We wanted to build out the kit a little bit more. I know we're really going to taste one true, like, we're here for one whiskey today, but we thought it would be a good idea, when you understand why, what we're doing here is relying on the strengths of our regions. And I'll explain that a little bit. And we have a couple of bottles to help illustrate those strengths. And I believe you guys should have a little bit of Jim Beam Black and a bottle of Toki, or a sample of Toki, which is a Japanese whiskey. And when I talk about our strengths and bringing them together as whiskey makers, let's start over here in the good old US of A. We think about, anybody that's been part of anything I've done for the Whiskey Society here has always known, we talk about what makes bourbon, right? It's made in the United States. It's made of no less than 51% corn. It's aged in a new unused charred oak container. It's distilled no higher than 160 proof, put into a barrel no higher than 125 proof, put into a bottle no lower than 80 proof. And last but not least, there's nothing you can add or subtract to the flavor or color before you put it into a barrel for maturation other than water. And if you're playing by those rules, congratulations, you are probably making good old bourbon whiskey. Now, what does that mean? When we create bourbon, whether you prefer Scotch, or you prefer Canadian whiskey, or you prefer Irish whiskey, or you prefer Japanese whiskey, or whatever whiskey you might prefer, when you taste bourbon in relation to those, it's always going to be a very big flavor, right? It's a big, bold flavor, and that's what bourbon is known for by and large. But we're going to have those sweet notes. We're going to have those vanillins and caramels, and a lot of that's going to come from the barrel. And when we look at bourbon whiskey, 100% of its color comes from interaction with barrel wood. But a majority balance of the flavor, and that's agnostic of producer or product, is going to come from the interaction with the barrel too. Of course, you always want to hit a good balance of what the grain provides for the flavor and what the barrel provides for the flavor, but the barrel does do the majority of the flavoring. So getting those vanillins, getting those caramels, getting some of those fruitier notes that happen during oxidation, that come from the esters during distillation as well, that carry over and develop and mature and turn into different flavors and aromas. All those things happen because we create flavor, right? And it's our use of new oak. We have to use those barrels one time only we take about 75% of that barrel's potential as a flavoring agent out of that barrel when we're done. And so I argue globally that we are the only whiskey, bourbon as a major style of whiskey, not to speak to smaller little offshoots here in the United States, but I argue that bourbon is truly the only whiskey that uses the barrel as a real ingredient of the original barrel. Not talking about finishing barrels and things like that, because we know that we do finishes all over the world and do them very well. But I think that initial American oak barrel is a true ingredient in flavor and aroma when you talk about bourbon whiskey in relation to the rest of the country, or the rest of the world, excuse me. But that's what we do. We develop flavor. And so we lean on that as our strength to create that wonderful bourbon. And Fred is going to do that the same as he makes Jim Beam every day, the same care that he might take into making Knob Creek or his father's bourbon Booker's, or maybe a little bit of Basil Hayden. All of that care and consideration goes into making the whiskey that starts off as Legent, using that traditional Jim Beam family yeast strain, using the water that comes from the creek there in Claremont, using our traditional bourbon mash bill. All of that is going to be distilled and aged specifically to be a Legent. But why we have this Jim Beam Black in your kit is for you to get a nice flavor reference for sort of the bourbon that we're going to start off with when we start talking about Legent's unique story. So the first chapter of our story is written exclusively by Fred. He's our first author, and he's going to make this bourbon just as I mentioned, making sure that all those vanillins, all those caramels, and all those wonderful hallmark bourbon aromas and flavors are delivered to you in the whiskey that we're going to start off with. And while I can't necessarily give you a sample of what that base bourbon is going to be in our blend for Legent, I can give you a nice reference point, and that's going to be the Jim Beam Black. And Jim Beam Black uses all those things I just mentioned, the water source from the creek in Claremont, which is that wonderful limestone filtered, iron-free, calcium and magnesium-rich water that we need and love to make our bourbon taste the way it does. We have, that mash bill of corn, rye, and barley that yeast strain that Colonel Beam captured off his windowsill all those many generations ago to start making whiskey, and that we've protected every day since, and we continue to use every day. We are the only one of two major large distilleries out there that still uses a jug yeast and creates our own jug yeast. Most folks have moved over to a dry yeast at this point, something you can buy in a box, and that's fine. We just like to have our live yeast strain because it's something that we've always kind of started with. And then he's going to age them in the warehouses, and we're going to let this whiskey age for 4, 5, 6 years. What we're looking for here is a flavor, not just a day on a calendar. As you see, age statements disappearing, some come back, some disappear, but you see that happening not just in bourbon, but also whiskey around the world. And I think that this helps us to drive the idea that older is not always better, much like more expensive isn't always better, even though, Derek, that probably hurts you to hear me say that as a business owner in the whiskey business, right? But more expensive is not always better, and older is not always better. But what it matters is we really want to go for a signature flavor profile. And that's where we have given you this reference point to let you know all of our Legion will start off with that little sample of Jim Beam Black that you have in your glass. So go ahead and give that a taste. Again, 4, 5, 6-year-old barrels are going to make this blend. And then we're going to go into the dump to create this large format blend or batch. And then it's going to be 86 proof. But if you guys don't know Jim Beam Black, it is a wonderful bourbon to get to know. It is very affordable. It delivers great mature whiskey flavor. It is very sippable. It is very easy to drink on its own or on the rocks. And if you feel like having a little highball as the summer comes around and your Cardinals are going to start playing some baseball that you can go see in person, a little highball isn't going to hurt in the stands either, right? So 1 part Jim Beam Black over ice in a tall glass with 4 parts club soda. Make sure it's bubbly and cold, and you'll be refreshed all day. I like highballs, can you tell?
Same here. I love highballs, and you're absolutely right.
Yeah, so
Both of these work really well.
Yep. So I know that we have a couple of questions in the chat that I've seen popping up. I haven't been holding on to them, but Elizabeth, do you see any that I should probably get to right now?
No, I just did a quick Google to answer Bill's question about the proof. So yeah, I'll just make sure that I'll put the proofs in there for each. Do you know off the top of your head?
Yeah, so Jim Beam Black is 86 proof, Toki's going to be 80 proof, and then Legion is 94 proof.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, you got it. So as you can see, 86 proof, very approachable proof, very quaffable, but lots of flavor going on, right? Now, this isn't a Knob Creek, this isn't a Booker's, this isn't a Baker's, but a lot of flavor going on for something at 86 proof. That's what we do in Kentucky. That is our strength. Even though Japan might create great flavors, which they do, their strength that we're going to lean into as we talk about Toki is blending. But that's not to say that over in the United States, we don't do an awesome job of blending either. It's just that our distillers and our barreling is really what we're known for, much more so than our blenders. But I do think with certain things like Legent and the fun things that Freddie Generation 8 is now doing with Little Book, and the things that you might see coming from the industry in general, as people start blending because it's fun and you can do a lot of great things, people will start paying more attention to blending over here. But we just kind of were a little bit ahead of the game, as we should be as Beam Suntory and as Jim Beam. We should be leading the category, which we are. And I saw Elizabeth, you had a hand up. What's going on?
Yeah, and I think we should take a moment to comment on Black, and it's kind of a really underrated whiskey. It received one of the highest rankings a few years ago. Do you want to talk about that for a moment?
Sure. This was one of the best kept secrets in our portfolio for the longest time. And if you had walked around our distillery any given day back in 2015, you ask anyone out there that's making the whiskey, what do you like to drink? Fred and Freddie included, myself included. Most would say that if they were going out for a fancy night and I was around with my corporate card, then we're going to drink a little Knob Creek. But on their own, what we're going to drink is we're going to drink a little Jim Beam Black. And that has been a family favorite and I mean extended family favorite for a very, very long time. And at its price, at its age, at its value, I used to call it the Allen Iverson of bourbon, or the Floyd Mayweather of bourbon, if that makes any sense. Pound for pound, you can't do any better than that. And so for better or worse, back in about 2016, I want to say, our little secret got out when the International Wine and Spirits Competition voted us best bourbon, and just flat out best bourbon. And it was something that we knew we always had, but now the world caught on to it. And lucky for us, we've seen appreciation, which drives sales for Jim Beam Black grow over these last many years. And it's not like it's going to create issues with allocation or availability, Jim Beam Black is one of those bourbons that you can always get. And at just about 20 bucks, depending on where you're shopping, that's a great value for a great flavor and a great product with a history that goes all the way back to the late 60s. So I hope you guys enjoy it. And if you haven't tried Jim Beam Black and this is your first time, then I hope you like it.
Yeah, this is one of our family favorites as well. This and my other secret, which is Old Granddad, as far as like,
It doesn't have to be a secret.
really, I want it to be a secret because I don't want to pick it.
Don't run out of Old Granddad either.
Several members on this that agree with me when it comes to Old Granddad.
Not like Booker's, where all of a sudden we start putting little unique stories on the bottles, and now you can't find a bottle of Booker's to save your life. And we used to do about 6 to 8 releases a year, and now we can only do 4, and you can barely keep those on the shelves, right?
Mhm.
John Eck OGD 114 is a fantastic bourbon, and not always easiest to find. I'll agree, but luckily the bonded and the 86 are usually pretty easy to find. And if you guys haven't seen some of the cool stuff we're doing with Overholt, and you like those old tried and true, true Americana bourbon brands, we've got some really cool stuff happening with Overholt too that I recommend maybe checking out. Between our, we're doing non-chill filtration on those whiskeys now, which is really cool. And we have a great bonded expression, which is nice. But let's talk about our other strength, and let's lean into what the Japanese bring, or the Japanese part of the family brings to Legent's story, and that's going to be blending. And as we kind of continue to tell our chapters, we'll go through the chapters again, but just to kind of speak to the whiskeys that you guys have in front of you, let's think about what they do with blending. Because of our environment in Kentucky, because of the raw materials we're using and the ingredients that we use, we have those big flavors. But over in Japan, they learned their whiskey making practices from the Scots, as a lot of you probably know. And so they took a lot of their knowledge and know-how from the Scottish region and traditions and practices of making whiskey and brought it over to Japan. And that includes starting off with malted barley, which is a lighter grain. Those cereal grains don't have the same big full flavor that corn does. And so you don't need to use a new barrel, which is another one of the reasons why we use new barrels with bourbon, is because we have to be 51% corn at least. And that's going to create big flavor. So you need big flavor to balance big flavor, and then you end up with big flavor in a balanced fashion. But when you have Japanese whiskey, and if you have those European style whiskeys, now you have something that starts off with a light bodied distillate from that cereal grain, malted barley. And then you have, you don't need the new barrel, right? Because of course it's going to knock it out of balance. You're going to have a whiskey that just tastes like oak, and you might as well just bite into a bar stool at that point, right? So they like to use a used barrel and create lighter flavors over time, right? And I think that as, I'm a Lafroig fan. Lafroig is a scotch made over in Islay. It's a peated scotch, heavily peated scotch. And you can kind of build flavors and temper flavors in peated whiskey and Scotch whiskey in 2 different ways. If you want to take the stairs down and kind of let it smooth out, then you let it age for a while. But if you want to build flavors, and it's really hard to kind of think about building flavors when you've got something like a peated scotch or something full flavored like that, you do that by finishing the whiskey in barrels to add depth and nuance to that product. I'm not a Scotch whiskey expert or Japanese whiskey expert by any means, so this is just my own kind of opinion in the way that I talk about these flavors and development there. But in Japan, they start off, they have that mild climate. So they use short warehouse, or very not tall warehouses like we do. And they're usually made of stone of some sort. And they accentuate the mild climate, whereas we like to accentuate our extreme climates, very hot summers, very cold winters, beautiful fall, beautiful spring. And so that creates a pretty mild whiskey. And it's light, and it's delicious, and it's nuanced. But what Shinji is going to do as the chief blender is he's going to start taking these whiskeys, and they have 3 major distilleries that we're going to talk about that are going to contribute to the toki in your glass or in front of you. That's going to be our Yamazaki distillery, probably the most well-known. And then our Hakushu distillery, a beautiful distillery in the Japanese Alps, which I had the pleasure of visiting back in the winter of 2020. And then before everything shut down the way it has. And then the Cheetah distillery, which is a grain distillery that makes kind of a Japanese bourbon in a way. It's a corn-based Japanese whiskey, which is very, very tasty. And so creating those flavors, as nuanced and as light as they are, there is quite a bit that goes into some barrels for finishing. There will be some peated aspects. There will be some sherry barrel finishes going on there. A lot of it's going to be Mizunara casks, obviously being a Japanese whiskey, and some of it's going to be some of those second, third run American oak barrels. A lot of those are starting to have the name Jim Beam on them, as you could imagine. Some of those small batch names after 6 years of our family being together. And so we're really building flavors, and you're going to create and craft even more nuanced flavors with those building blocks through Shinji's talent of blending. And his talent is so immense, as we mentioned, all the awards that he's won, but he keeps his tools, meaning his palate, in tune by eating the same thing every day. He goes to work and he eats cold udon and tempura for lunch. And that's what he does, or cold soba and udon, excuse me. That keeps his tongue calibrated, his palate calibrated to where he goes to work every day and blends the right way. They changed chefs. They got new chefs in the lunch cafeteria at his distillery, Yamazaki. He taught the guy how to make his lunch in order to keep things consistent. So that's how seriously he takes his job as a blender. Again, remember, Fred No, master distiller. He's our superstar over here in the United States. Jimmy Russell, superstar. All those guys, superstars. You go over to Japan, or you think about whiskeys from all over the world or global whiskeys, and it's the blenders who are the superstars. And Shinji is second to none. And you can just see his commitment to that through the way that the man even just eats every day, right? Fred, you need to give Fred a hamburger here and there, okay? Right? So let's go ahead and try that Toki. Toki is going to be a blend. The main portion of this blend is going to be the Cheetah whiskey. So it's going to be that grain whiskey. And then we're going to have Yamazaki, and then a little bit of Hakushu. And you're going to be able to see the depth and nuance of flavor and aroma in those whiskeys, but they don't come up at you quick like bourbon does. You've really got to get into them a little bit. But you see, this is where the skill lies. This is the strength of Japanese whiskey, is blending. Any questions so far?
I have one question for Chris Penn. Do you still have that bottle of Cheetah?
Actually, I do. Yes.
Yeah,
Nice.
really cool. We got to try that the other day, and that was
Yeah, it's
really
good, isn't it?
reminds me a lot of this. So
Yeah, it's great. Funny enough, being a bourbon guy, I gravitate towards Cheetah. I like that a lot. I think it's got great flavor. You know, I also really like the single grain that they make at Kilbeggan, which is kind of like Irish bourbon. So those are things that I enjoy from a global aspect, but it stands to reason since it has similarities to bourbon in so many ways, right?
So real quick, Adam, I'm sorry, real
Please.
quick. I am privileged to own a Yamazaki 12, a Hakushu 12, and then I hope I pronounced this correctly, Ochi.
That one I don't.
It's a Suntory product. I might not be pronouncing it correct. It's a peated
Okay.
Japanese.
Okay.
I'd have to go find the basement in the bottle, or the bottle in the basement.
Yeah.
But this is a Suntory product, and it's peated.
Okay. You might have a pretty. Was it recent or something?
No, well,
independently?
most things I haven't bought of recent, but it probably within the last 18 months. I mean, I can go off camera and find it real quickly.
If you want to.
Yeah, let me disappear for a bit and go into the vault, as
Sure.
Jared would say.
Yeah.
I like
I'll
it.
be back.
We won't
back
do
shortly.
too much without you. All right.
I'll be back shortly.
Okay. Any other questions? Well,
I'm curious, just raise your hand if this is your first time trying Toki or a Japanese whiskey, or have you all had Dan first time? So what is your thought on it? You can unmute yourself if you want.
Mute button. No, it's yeah, I can definitely see it's a little more lighter, a little more fruity. But it's does got a good flavor, and color is a little lighter, but yeah, it is a little different.
Mm-hmm.
it's complex, and that complexity comes from blending, right? It comes from blending. We get a lot of complexity from the way we age and time in the barrel. But complexity is going to come from, even though we're talking, like James mentioned, 12 year, 18 year, 21 year, all those things. Like a lot of times that's just a way to let the flavor rest and to develop slowly and lightly and gently over time, as opposed to the slightly more accelerated way that we use maturation. But it does create. Go ahead, Dan.
Sorry, is there a standard aging that Suntory does, or the Toki?
Oh, yeah. So did you ask about a range of aging?
Yes. Mhm.
Yeah. The whiskey that's in Toki is going to be non-age stated. So that I'm not sure what the ages are as far as they age out there for you. But you know, I think there's a 50-year-old Yamazaki that's very limited release. It's coming out right as we speak around this time, and I think it's something like $70,000 for a bottle of it, something like that. So just one of those coveted whiskeys that I'll never sniff, you know. It happens.
So
James
I
got
am
the
here.
bottle.
Yeah. Yoichi. Yeah, you said it right. Yoichi.
Yeah. So it's a Nika
Uh-huh.
whiskey. Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm privileged to have this. I think it's pretty limited.
Yeah.
St. Louis market, along with the Hakushu 12 and the Yamazaki 12. And I did next to it, I found my Hibiki Harmony.
There you go.
It's great. It's one of my favorites.
Hibiki was on the Harmony was released to be available, and this run on Japanese whiskey just knocked it out. It's hard to find Harmony even these days, but that was actually put out to kind of be available to everybody that ever wanted to try Japanese whiskey. And now we see just how popular everything is. I mean, you know, let's be honest with ourselves. We've created our own monster, right? Like, we are part of the monster. We are the folks that are out there collecting bottles that nobody can find. And
yeah, all four are very tasty.
Yeah. One of the great things about Gambler Whiskey House when it was still around was that you had the opportunity, because you guys did such a great job of grabbing available products when they were there, to being able to go and try whiskey by the drink instead of having to try and hoard the bottle or chase a bottle and push some old lady over in order to get a bottle, right? And that's just what's going on right now. And it's too bad, because I think that we all need to be able to go and try a drink, try a $20 drink instead of having to buy a $250 bottle, right? And hopefully we can get back to a time where it's a little bit easier to grab it by the drink than by the bottle, but we'll see. We'll see.
Well, what I would say,
real quick, I crave
sorry,
Toki highballs, right?
Yeah.
Because, you know, first when you drink Toki, it's a little bit different, so you have to get used to it a little bit. We started drinking Toki highballs at Gambling Whiskey House when it first came out. Had one, had another, and then I started craving it. And I think it's just a great whiskey for that. Like you said, highballs, great. But I also discovered something else. I drink this every once in a while, Toki in a short glass, half Toki, half water, and it's fantastic. It's like drinking refreshing water.
Yeah,
I mean, it's fantastic. So
I had the same thing, Derek, because I was with you when we first had those highballs, and and I think it was also, you know, when you have a moment where you're somewhere and it's a season, like we were outside, it was summer, we're drinking them on the patio. And so when I think about a patio cocktail, like I think about a Toki highball. Like it's just really, it brings you back to that moment.
It's probably great marketing by Jim Beam, but Beam Suntory, but it really, I really think it's fantastic.
Toki was put out there as a whiskey intentionally made for highballs. And that's really what it was put out in the market for. I think that what you guys are just expressing, especially Elizabeth, talking about being on a patio and having a highball, for those of y'all that haven't got on the highball train yet or might be skeptical about it, a lot of that skepticism is driven by the idea that highball is just a whiskey soda, gang, right? But it's not. A highball is a lifestyle. It's brought about by the right ingredients, treated the right way, prepared the right way. And when you get that first one done, when you get a true highball and not a whiskey soda, you will know exactly what Derek and Elizabeth just talking about, because it is a lifestyle drink and not just something that you pour up at the neighborhood stumble in, right?
Yeah,
quick question.
Quality ingredients go into that. That's not just your out of the tap club soda. So soda or ginger ale for a good highball. I like a good soda, a good quality soda in mine.
Same. Bubbly. I'd be bubbly to lift the flavors, right?
Absolutely.
Helps keep the flavor and helps keep things cold.
And then Mike Johnson, I don't know if you want to chime in on the chat about availability of Toki in the market. And I know you're still new, so you may not have all the answers quite yet. So any other members that want to chime in on that? Thanks, John, for adding your comments into there. So, all right, are we ready to hit the main event? Adam?
Quick question first. Quick question first.
Yeah, Bill's got a
So, a little bit of water is going into my bourbons as we go, and it certainly makes a change. I tried a little bit in the the toki, and it didn't seem to alter it very much. Is that typical? I mean, and I'm only talking, 6 or 7 drops, just enough to break it up a little bit.
Yeah, I think the scale of influence is going to be lesser on the lighter flavor than the bigger flavor, obviously, just because there's a lot more to sort of tame, if you want to say that word, by adding the water on the bourbon. I think that you've got a lighter flavor to start with, and then you just sort of lighten that up. So the difference isn't as noticeable. It's going to be more slight. I mean, it's certainly still there, and I bet that as you continue to sip on it, if you went back and forth and tried it, you would see just how dynamic the differences are. The fact that we tasted bourbon beforehand probably isn't doing your palate any favors right now, because it is a bigger, bolder flavor than that Japanese whiskey is. So you're already kind of maybe a little bit put you at a little bit of a disadvantage, right, by trying the bourbon first. But I'm the bourbon guy after all, so we're going to try bourbon first and finish with bourbon too. But I think those reasons are probably why you're experiencing it that way.
So this was my first Japanese anything ever.
Okay.
Is this characteristic of the Japanese style? This
Yes.
type of, okay. So if I'm going to find more of a Scotch influence than a bourbon influence across the Japanese continuum.
Yep.
Okay.
And I think so too, that it's, we could talk all night about, as some of these folks know, we could talk all night, but this is indicative as well as just the palate of the cultures. When you think about the food that we sort of celebrate and crave over here in the US, it's big, bold flavor. We like our big, bold barbecue. There you are in St. Louis, right? Y'all know about that. And the way that we cook. And then over there in Japan, you gotta try to make things spicy over there. They like things to be delicate and graceful and fresh, and not that we don't appreciate that over here, obviously, but it just speaks to the cultural differences in so many ways, how we communicate through whiskey.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome. So let me try and keep us on time here, and let's move into Legent. So we had our first chapter with Fred, and then we move into the second chapter as these two authors, Fred and Shinji, co-author the finishing process. And if you can go back to the video and remember what they talked about then, they will take some of that fully matured bourbon, referencing again back to that flavor profile of Jim Beam Black, and they'll put that in a red wine cask. The whiskey that you're trying right now has been finished in a California Cabernet barrel. It's resting there for the better part of 2 full summers. So allowing that whiskey to really mature. And this is happening in Kentucky. So Shinji did make some trips over to the US, but a lot of this was happening over the phone and over Zoom. And I like to joke with Fred every once in a while about, he was kind of ahead of the curve on this teleconferencing, telecommuting thing when he and Shinji were doing this back in 16, 17, 18, while they were getting this recipe right, this blend right. Because they were having to do this a lot of odd hours talking back and forth. And so a lot of that will spend time in red wine. And right now, as I mentioned, I can tell you that it's California Cabernet, but it could change to keep things consistent, because one thing that wine does that bourbon doesn't is it changes with vintages. So the flavors that we might get if we hamstrung us to one barrel or one vendor might be different every vintage to vintage, but we want to be able to have the flexibility to move around. And then one thing that will stay the same is the other portion of the blend, which is the smallest portion, and that'll be our Oloroso sherry barrel finish. And Shinji loves Oloroso sherry. He loves what it brings to Japanese whiskey. He's fallen in love with what it brings to bourbon. And so we're always going to keep it that same way. And that's going to be the smallest percentage, also finished no less than 2 full summers at the distillery in Kentucky, resting there in our warehouses. So what we're going to do then is Shinji takes over his chapter and writes the third and final chapter of this. Actually, the final chapter is you guys being tasted. But the third chapter is Shinji taking 3 liquid streams, the fully matured Jim Beam bourbon, the red wine finished bourbon, and then the Oloroso sherry finished bourbon. And he takes all 3 of those and he lets them sit. We put those together in Kentucky in a stainless steel barrel, a big barrel tub, where we'll let those blend and meld and get to know each other for 30 days. This is a practice that Shinji does in Japan with everything he does over there, and it's something we're honoring over here, and it works because that gives you an opportunity. If anybody's ever done their you know, you've made your own bottle blends, you've done the infinity bottles, maybe you've made barreled cocktails at home and you let those ingredients kind of come together, you know that they start to sort of, they take each other's edge off, you know, just think about you when you go to a party, you take your edge off, other people are taking their edge off, and you get to know each other better. And that's what happens inside that blending vat. That's going to happen for 30 days, all at cask proof, barrel strength, whatever you want to call it, original proof. And then as we bring it down before it goes in the bottle, we'll filter it and take it to 94 proof as you have it in front of you right now. And now let's go ahead and pick up our Legent, as the third chapter has now been finished. And we will now write our own chapter, which is how you guys appreciate it and what you think of Legent. So immediately, you know, I always like to think we drink with our eyes first, just like you eat with your eyes, you drink with your eyes first, whether it's something neat or in a cocktail, and just look at that color. Now, 94 proof, we've got a good amount of proof on there, so the color is going to be dark anyway. But you see that nice little ruby hue, that red hue? That's going to come from those wine and Oloroso sherry barrel finishes. That's not all bourbon barrel. Because when you think about building the flavor, not only is it coming from the residual of what's been left in these barrels that we're finishing it with, but the American bourbon barrel is made of American white oak. The California Cabernet barrel is made of French oak. The Oloroso sherry barrel is made of Spanish oak. These woods are going to contribute their own flavor and nuance as well. So we're just building complexity. All right. And so let's go ahead and give it a swirl. And you can see it's got some nice legs on it. And I always like to tell this joke because those legs right there, being from Kentucky, are thoroughbred legs. Yeah. Elizabeth's like, I've heard that 50 times and it's already so old.
And I still love it. I still laugh every time. Because I think you're about to say something else, like Wildcat cheerleader legs, but you took it more like.
Yeah. Well, different time.
Yeah.
Now, let's go ahead and nose this whiskey. And the way that I like to nose a new whiskey, I know that we've already tasted and nosed some things, but just go ahead and set the glass under your nose, part your lips, take 3 quick inhalations. By doing that, the ethanol goes into the atmosphere and we're able to focus on the flavors and the aromas in the whiskey. Now, I'm not gonna lie, there's bourbon at the front, right? Vanilla, caramel, but there's something rounder and richer underneath it. And it doesn't take long to get right under there. And what I pick up is a lot of like red, ripe fruits, berries, cherry, currant. There's a little bit of acidity in that nose too. There's something that's a little bit like tangy, right? And that's that light acidity coming from the wine barrel. All the things I just mentioned are going to come from the wine barrel. And then as you get a little deeper in there, the really round bottom, the round bodied bottom of this whiskey is going to come from that smallest percentage, which is the Oloroso sherry finish. And that's going to be some of that, the jammier note, the figgier note, the dried prune, you might be picking up a raisin, and a little bit of salt too. There's going to be a little salinity there because the Oloroso is going to have that little bit of nutty salinity. So very complex, right? See it, Dan, how we're building the flavors with that blending? What do you guys think? Isn't that something? It's got bourbon, you know, it's a bourbon, but there is something else happening, right?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Jefferson Reserve Groth cask, which you can't get anymore. And this kind of has a little bit of essence to that, you know, because of obviously the finishing component. But what I felt was interesting was when I took my first few sips, I thought it was a little more, like I had a little spice on the front end, and obviously that's the alcohol hitting your tongue too a little bit. And it had, like, it's mouth watering. I didn't feel like I was finding that dried fruit, that dry aspect until a few more sips later, which is very interesting. And I know that alcohol is playing the actual alcohol is playing around in your tongue, but it kind of was changing. It was a little more complex than I was expecting. So I don't know if anybody else had that same kind of experience.
I'd say it's quite by design, Elizabeth. This is a whiskey that you're not going to get to know from the first sip, right? This is one that you have to have a conversation with, as I like to say sometimes, and just sort of getting into it a little bit, feeling free to add a little bit of water. Don't do that yet, because I want us to sort of talk a little bit more about that flavor as we get into the taste. Go ahead, and the way that I like to do is just let it sit on your tongue for a minute, roll it around, do the Kentucky chew, coat your palate, and then see how the finish treats you. And that finish, it's a very round and luscious flavor with a very long and mouth-watering finish. And that's a really great thing when you're talking about bourbon, because it makes you just want to have another drink when you're salivating like that, right? So let's go ahead and see what we think about this. Cheers to y'all.
The other note I want to make is, a lot like Maker's Mark 46. The goal is to have that full mouth feel with Maker's 46, and I get that with this. It's not just on the front, it's on the side, it's everywhere. So, I mean, you really can appreciate the blending technique in this. I mean, it's very powerful.
Yeah, I think it's going to take 3 to 5 sips, and savors, and pontifications to kind of really get into all the different flavors that have been blended. When you're thinking about those red ripe fruits and the acidity, you pick that up kind of around the second or third taste. When you really get into it and that finish is now kind of truly coated your tongue and you're experiencing that finish from sip to sip to sip, and you really start to get that Oloroso influence, that it just starts to develop and you just get to know this bourbon more and more. Do I drink this every day? I don't. But every time I drink it, I wonder why I don't drink it every day, right? Because it's just that cool and it's just that good. We have a lot of great.
It had a very it's silky finish kind of to me, and that makes me want to drink more of it.
Yeah.
But I did have a question. When I first tasted this, it was approximately I would say 3 years ago at the distillery. Is that about when it came out? Maybe somewhere.
That's when we were probably you probably got a little sneak preview because we liked it so much.
Yeah. So when I tried it, I really liked it. And I was looking forward to it coming into Missouri, and it just didn't come in for the longest time. It didn't come in and the entire time that we were open. So just a question about how that blending worked. Did it change at all from that first time that I tried it? Have they adjusted it in any way? No?
We've kept it the same. It stayed the same.
That's great. That's great.
That's not to say that in the future, and there might not be an opportunity for reformulation for maybe a different release, something like that, or maybe something in the duty-free space. But we are, in 2019, we launched in 11 US markets exclusively. We didn't go coast to coast. And then in late 2019 into 2020, we went global, and I had some global markets that we released in. And around that same time, as lockdown sort of happened, we went national with Legent.
So you had mentioned a little bit ago that the cab, like the winemakers that you're partnering with on this, you are fluid. And so that makes me question like the palette that this is going, like you can't exactly recreate those wine casks in order to get this. So will this be kind of a released thing, or do you think that they're going to do their darndest to just make sure that it's very consistent?
Consistency will be the aim and the goal of everything we do with Legent. Yeah.
Okay.
But right now, that's what we're doing is we're aiming for consistency.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Great. So I'd be happy to hear whatever there's some comments in the chat. So does anyone want to chime in?
Elizabeth, just real quick, I just want to dovetail on something that Adam talked about briefly. When we're talking about, trying to find that elusive bottle. And I know we've talked about Old Grandad and Old Overhold, the regular bourbons that are around. I just want to let you know, Adam, and I hope you have this own experience where you live, but being part of a few whiskey groups in the St. Louis area, we do these bottle shares. And we get together at an open park, and you bring what you want to bring, you put it on a table, and you share it, you talk about it, and there's this camaraderie that is born by, the faces that I see on this group. Elizabeth, Derek, I actually met Brandon face to face the other day for the first time. John Schaefer, who doesn't even look old enough to drink. I've met him a number of times. Certainly Chris Penn, whose face you see there. The wonderful thing about our market, which I hope it echoes throughout the industry, you just bring a bottle and you put it down on the table and say, here you go. and you just share it. So, when you have some like an Ochi or Yamazaki 12 or anything that you want to bring. I know Derek loves Jim Beam quarter cask, and he starts
absolutely.
He starts to smile like a Cheshire cat right now. And I have a bottle that's open. I have a Jim Beam brandy cask that's open. I have one of each that's a backup right now. I'm privileged to be able to have certain items like so many other people do.
That's a good one. Brown rice.
There you go, brown rice.
Yeah.
And to just, Derek was kind enough. He gave me a Jim Beam 11-year-old rye a number of years ago. I'm privileged to have access to certain things. I'm even more privileged to share those things. And I love sharing things with people. And it's something that I'm looking forward to. We love Zoom calls, but we love that face-to-face stuff even more because it allows us to sit. We have so many beautiful parks in St. Louis.
Yeah.
And we sit down. We've had fire pits. It's been 35 degrees. Look at Elizabeth smiling. It's been 35 degrees and we're sitting out by a fireplace in Forest Park, and we're talking about drinking whiskeys and smoking cigars and having pretzels and things like that. So we don't have to find that secondary price bottle. We don't have to find that crazy price bottle to have a really good time with really good friends in the fellowship of whiskey.
Yeah.
It's
bottle at any price
or Irish.
Stay closed. A bottle is meant to be opened, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And enjoyed.
And shared. And speaking of bottles, that we're kind of up to our hour mark, and I just want to be mindful of everybody's time. Adam, I'm going to do a quick raffle, and then we can stay on if anyone has more questions that they want to ask you. Does that sound okay?
Sure. Yeah. I'm good for a while.
Cool. So Adam, I'm going to make you the good guy or the bad guy, whichever you want to be. So we have 27 select members that are going to have a chance tonight to win a bottle of Legent and a bottle and a second winner that will win a bottle of Basil Hayden dark rye. So I'm going to have you pick two numbers between 1 and 27.
All right. Well, let's see. The first one, lucky number 13. Lucky number 13.
13. Tom Kastner won a bottle of Legent. Congratulations, Tom. I don't think he's on here. And then a second number, 1 through 27 minus 13.
Let's see here. Well, let's go ahead and maybe John Schaefer is this 21. Let's go with 21.
Oh my gosh, Becky Babb won again. Basil Hayden. Becky won last month. Oh my goodness, you are a lucky woman.
Congratulations, both of you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Adam.
Is it a must be in attendance to win it? Because I don't think Tom's here, is he?
No, he's not. No, you don't have to be in attendance to win, but thank you for doing that. So this is just a great way to just thank our select members for helping support us and keep us
I hope you all enjoy those bottles too. And John, I hope you don't mind me having a little fun.
Oh, that's all right. I get that a lot. I'm 29, by the way, just so everybody knows. I am of age, so.
29.
John and I were chatting the other day. He's almost to his PhD, so he's going to be Dr.
I'm getting there. Yeah.
Yeah.
So one of these days, you're going to be so glad that everyone thinks you're so young. You're going to be like, nope, I'm 15.
That's right. Yeah.
When you're 70, you're going to be glad.
Yeah.
He's going to be like the Ralph Macchio of doctoring and stuff.
Ralph Macchio.
So we'll have to do a big post for you.
Celebrate his PhD.
Yeah, exactly. So let us know when it's official. We'll do a big toast. Any other questions for Adam? I mean, I love this tasting, just as a side note.
Very nice.
Only 3 things to taste and one major thing to talk about, but I think we had a good time doing it, right?
Yeah.
Excellent time.
Great.
So I'll throw an open question. I put it in the chat, but Elizabeth, you mentioned the Maker's 46, and so as my palate burner, I actually have an open Maker's 46 that I just used to start the night. But I noticed all of them over the course of the evening, as they've been sitting here open now in the glass for 35, 40 minutes, 45 minutes. They've all opened up and changed and become much more smooth, flavorful, etc. Is that typical? And I'm coming from the background of mostly a wine guy. 35 years I've been a wine guy. 5 years I've started to become a bourbon guy. Should I expect that in any of these? Because when I first started, the makers, the basing, the base point that I use today was pretty harsh and nasty. But now it's a whole lot better than I expected when I started.
You want to speak to that, Elizabeth, or you want me to go ahead and opine?
Yeah, about the opening up, I'm not as familiar as that.
Yeah. So when you have your whiskey open for a while, the flavor profile itself isn't going to change, but what you are going to experience is a lot of that ethanol is going to vaporize and dissipate. So that's that original alcoholic pain or burn or sting that you're going to get in your nose and on your tongue is going to go away. Because you're not going to be able to taste anything if you don't smell, right? And as alcoholic vapor doesn't go on your tongue, it goes up your nose. And as that ethanol will go up your nose, that's going to create a flavor that is going to, the more it goes up your nose, the more it's going to numb what is called your olfactory bulb, which is a little gland right here, your epithelium. And then that helps drive your flavor perception as well. You can't smell it, you can't taste it. If you numb your taste buds, or if you numb that bulb, you can't taste anything, but you're going to get alcohol, right? You'll know the alcohol. So if you let that vapor kind of dissipate over time in the 30, 40 minutes that we've been talking with open whiskey, then but it's not going to change the flavor itself. The actual chemistry of the flavor stays the same by and large. But, if you want to translate that to bottles, right? A closed and sealed bottle of whiskey, we can bury this under your backyard, wherever you are right now. And in 50 years, you can dig it up, 100 years, you can dig it up. It'll taste the same. If you open this bottle of whiskey and have a couple of drinks out of it, and you put it in a cool, dry place in your liquor cabinet, it'll stay the same taste for years if it's stored properly. Decade. Once you get down to the midway point, you might want to consider putting it into a smaller bottle, because that oxidation will start to occur as a little bit of air can get into the cracks. And then once you get beyond the halfway point, you're better off just drinking it, because then it'll start to maybe change a little bit more noticeably over the years. But it's still something that doesn't happen over a day or a week like a wine or an open beer might. This will be something that, and it won't condition either. So it'll just change, but it'll be a very slow and gradual change. But that's kind of a good rule of thumb as far as like full, a little full, mostly full, or full, mostly full, a little full, and less than full. When you get to the less than full, just drink it, or just keep putting it into a smaller and smaller bottle.
Yeah, and to add into that, and Derek, you might have a few pointers on this as well. Bill, since you're newer, are you familiar with the term Kentucky Chew?
Yes.
Okay, so
yeah, I've done at least one tour of bourbon country.
Okay,
I've done the Kentucky Bourbon Trail once and got the chew training.
Great. And the other note I just wanted to make was when we do single barrel tastings, we're drinking cask strength that's really potent. We're adding water to dilute that down to really find that sweet spot where you can actually taste the spirit, the flavor notes, and not just that alcohol. And then after about 3 or 4 of those distinct tastings, your palate kind of burns out. And so just being mindful, just Adam kind of touched on this, as far as that olfactory bone. I find that to be such a weird thing to say. That is important. So I always am timid. We actually had a whiskey tasting for Missouri Whiskey. So I remember this, Derek. There was we had 7 scotches in front of people.
It was too much.
And I was like, okay, by the time you get to 5, you're done.
Only Dustin can handle that.
Yeah.
He thinks he can, at least.
Yeah.
So another pointer that I have, just as far as tasting whiskey, I think for me, the longer you keep it in your mouth, the better it develops in your mouth. Okay. So the Kentucky Chew slows that down, slows it, you swallowing it. So we used to all do shots of whiskey, shots of Wild Turkey 101, just to get drunk. and you would have that same look that you have when you drink a shot of tequila, that burning sensation. But if I take a Wild Turkey 101 now and I keep it in my mouth for a little while and chew it down and just slowly swallow it, it's just a much different bourbon, one of my favorites. And it's the same thing with everything. If you take your time with it and just enjoy it, I think it really makes a big difference.
Great.
Great question. Thanks for asking that, Bill.
Awesome. Thank you.
I have a question. So being a marketing guy, I'm a big fan of really, really cool logos across any industry, any brand, or anything like that. Who designed the logo for the Legent bottle? Because I think that's incredible to have the outline of the two guys that made it, their silhouettes in there. That is flipping phenomenal.
Yeah. Thanks for saying that, Brandon, because if you guys haven't noticed, there is on this uniquely Japanese brushstroke, which is usually done with like a horsetail and ink paint. On the interior of the S curve on the top is going to be Fred No's face and silhouette. And then on the bottom, the lighting in here is terrible for this right now, but the bottom is going to be Shinji Fukuyo. And that was done by, I want to say, maybe Stranger and Stranger. We did have an agency work with us that helped create the little trademarks on the
Really,
label.
Stranger and Stranger, they do all the labels for John at Compass Box.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. I mean, we've had a lot of agencies over the years on a lot of brands, but I want to say it might have been Stranger.
That's great.
Yeah.
I love design questions, Brandon. Thank you.
Yeah. But this actually, the little double L on the side, on the top, was a little something that my team and I did. They wanted to do a square, 2 L's, but I grew up at a certain time where an L7 was like, what would you say? Like you'd say, oh, loser, right? Like when you would do that. So I said, that looked like an L7, guys. Don't put that on there. And so we retooled it to make it that circle, and I think it looks a lot cooler.
Nice.
Yeah.
Stands alone as its own element.
Bitsy spider.
Yes.
Itsy bitsy spider. Yes. Itsy bitsy spider.
You can tell that you work with kids.
I just want to add to something Adam said real quick. Anybody who has a bottle that's less than half full, bring it to the next bottle share.
There you go. Yeah.
We don't want your whiskey to go to waste.
Good point. Good point. Before it goes
Very
bad.
generous of you there, James. Very generous.
Thank you.
He's very generous, and we appreciate it.
I'm caring about the spirit. That's all I'm caring. I'll return the gift in kind.
Well, just thank you everybody so much for sticking with us. And just a little teaser, we have American Barrel Bourbon next month. Dana, who was on, but she had already bounced off, will be representing them. We will be doing that Zoom. Their ambassador obviously can't travel yet, and so we'll still be on Zoom another month, but we'll be trickling this summer back into in-person. So we're just kind of figuring out the right moment to do it. And, as we're all getting our vaccines and everything. So thank you, everyone. We can't keep doing this if it wasn't for you guys. Again, just Women in Whiskey. If you have a special person in your life that you would love for her to learn more, have her join us. Let's see, Becky and Catherine, I believe, will be at that event next week. And Chris's wife, Leslie, will be there as well. So if you need anything from me, you know how to reach me. If you need anything from Derek, they'll probably have to come through me. No, I'm kidding.
Probably.
Derek, get on Facebook. Derek, get on Facebook.
Being honest. Best being honest.
And then just if we can just give Adam a round of applause.
Thank you guys very much. You too.
Hey,
Thanks,
Adam, I forgot. Like, we usually try to end with a toast, and I didn't prepare you. Do you have a toast off the top of your head? Anyone have anything left or a glass of water?
Sure. Let's see here. I like to say, if I don't see in the future, I'll see in the pasture, but that's I don't want to do that one tonight. Let's see. How about, as St. Louis is a beer town with a whiskey problem, here's one for y'all. In heaven, I hear they don't distill their beer, and that's why we should try to drink it all here. Cheers.
There you go.
There
Cheers.
you go. Cheers.
All right. God bless everybody. Have
Thanks a
good
lot.
night.
Thank you all. Appreciate it.
Hey, y'all, take care, be safe.
Bye.
Yeah.